Well, I think we can get started. I can introduce to you Jenny Acosta. She comes to us from Understanding Our Differences. So the Human Rights Commission, the Wakefield Human Rights Commission, is grateful that she's here to join us and for all of you. I invited her here to come talk with us tonight because she will also be visiting 3 of our elementary schools. She's doing a program this month at Walton, Dolbear, and Greenwood. Which is through the PTO sponsors a LAD Day, learning about disabilities and differences each year in our schools. And so this year, Jenny will be visiting 3 of those schools and talking about greater understanding, respect, and inclusivity of disabilities, just kind of educating our students and schools and us. And so we thought it would be nice to have an evening with adults so that she can kind of share this information with us as well. Of course, that's obviously a mission of the Human Rights Commission to make sure we're having open dialogue and making Wakefield as inclusive as we possibly can. So welcome, Jenny. I'm going to give her the floor in just a moment, but if anybody has questions throughout, I think you could probably feel free to just speak up, or please feel free to put them in the chat and I will read them. And Jenny, I think I'll give it right over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here on the eve of the snowstorm that we'll see what happens, right? So I'm going to share some slides with you all. But again, as Jill mentioned, feel free to jump in with a question if you have one. I promise it won't be the whole time that we're on here. I'm just going to hide some of these controls here so you can see it. Okay, so I'm just going to share a little bit about understanding our differences, why we feel understanding our differences is important. Our program is a brief overview, what it looks like in Wakefield so far, and other things that we do in communities, and then just open up the floor for questions. So Understanding Our Differences was founded by parents in 1978. And it educates communities to respect and include people of all abilities through school-based, primarily interactive disability awareness programs. This happened right as kids were being mainstreamed into public schools, kids with disabilities. Most of the parents had children with disabilities at the time. And why UOD? Disability is diversity. It's often a piece that can be left out a bit in the diversity, equity, and inclusion dialogue, but it's starting to kind of gain a little bit of traction. People with disabilities are the largest minority group in the US, at about 26% of the population, and only 19% of people with disabilities are employed. 14% of students in public education have a disability, and that can vary by district too, and receive special education services. And we're all likely to have a disability at some point in our lives, temporary or permanent. We feel very strongly that physical side-by-side inclusion is not enough. So even in full inclusion schools, real understanding and social interaction comes from a better understanding of the disabilities. Some of the most difficult barriers to overcome are often the attitudes of other people. This is a video. It's just a very short clip of one of our guest speakers, and also he's now our board co-president, Joe Quintanilla, and he's explaining why he thinks programs like this are important.
One of the things that I also had to deal with when I was your age is I didn't really understand why I couldn't see. And that it bothered me, and that it made me sad, and it made me angry. And I couldn't understand why if I dropped something, like a toy, I couldn't find it. If someone, tapped me on the head that was sitting behind me, and I turn around and ask them, stop that. And the kids would say, I didn't do anything. What are you talking about? Or I don't know who did that. So those things made me feel bad. And it was also not being able to participate in gym class fully. I couldn't really play basketball. I couldn't really play tennis. So those are some of the things that frustrated me and bothered me and made me sad when people you know, some other kids treated me differently because I couldn't see. Sometimes I couldn't participate in class because teachers didn't think that I could participate in class. But fortunately, things changed. And it changed because people's attitudes changed. One of the things that I also
Sorry, it always does that. Okay. And then this quote from a Newton Elementary School principal: if you want to foster an inclusive environment, just like with race, you have to talk about it and convey a message that fosters understanding. You have to make the values of inclusion explicit. I live in a district where my kids don't have UOD. I wish they did. So our approach is primarily directed at elementary school students, although we have worked with other age groups, including high school and middle school. But the goal is for students to learn about different disabilities and also strategies, adaptations, and inclusion. The contents are developed by educators, people with disabilities, parents of children with disabilities, and other experts in the field. And it's directed at the right grade level of young students. Our goal is to represent a broad range within disability, recognizing that, you know, it's a varied experience, even within each sort of topic area we address. To address what kids will experience in the classroom and community, and to introduce the topic and encourage continuing conversations. Often the barrier to talking about it in a classroom is sort of a reluctance to broach the topic to begin with. So our goal is to enable that. We very much center people with disabilities. Guest speakers are very important to us, people with the disability who can share their stories, meet the students, and answer their questions. This is sometimes there's guest speakers who work directly with us. Sometimes they're guest speakers from the district, and sometimes that even includes students from the district, which is a great opportunity for them to learn self-advocacy and gain skills through sharing their experiences. We have 10 units for our school program, and they're designed for students in grades 2 through 5, although we do age that up and down, as you'll see in a little bit. But it's autism, blindness, and low vision. There's 4 chronic medical conditions: allergic conditions, asthma, diabetes, and epilepsy, deafness and hard of hearing, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, and physical disabilities. And, you know, the up to 2 units per year is kind of variable. It really just depends on the school and the district. Coming up for Dolbear Elementary, the LAD day is Wednesday, February 28th, and the topics by grade level are by grade level groups. So grades 1 through 2 will be learning about intellectual disabilities. Grades 3 through 4 will learn about autism, and kindergarten, separated into 2 groups, will learn about allergic conditions. There's pre and post unit web pages, a unit introduction presentation, and then all students together for those grade level groups will hear from an in-person guest speaker, and then they'll get to ask questions, and there'll be follow-up activities for teachers. Walton actually has done their programming, and they chose to do to grade level groups in kindergarten through 2nd and 3rd through 4th, assembly style. And it was presented by our other board co-president, who is Gary Alpert, and he's a deaf guest speaker. He's been doing it since he was about their age, actually, about 4th grade, I think. And the students were able to ask him questions after he shared his experiences. And then along with that presentation, the teachers have available to them the family message with the pre and post unit web pages, and 3 interactive activities to choose from with materials, instructions, and training videos for them to lead with their students. These are just examples of questions that kids ask. I like to share them just because you kind of get a flavor of what the kids are thinking about. This is Joe again. You saw him earlier. You know, what it's like to be blind. What is it like to be blind? How do you get to different places without a car? Joe plays a lot of sports and he talks about it. So they always ask about that. You know, how do you play the sports, beat baseball and run marathons? Who helps you around the house? How do you cook? Did you get frustrated when you were a kid? And what's the coolest thing you've done? Can you read Braille? And then comments, which I love. He's talented. This is so cool. Thank you. Oops. And this is a different speaker. This is Elizabeth Avery. She's our an autism speaker for us. And you can see what they're asking about. Hardest challenge you faced. What job do you have now? Do you like having autism so you can teach people about it? Is it hard to concentrate on things you aren't interested in? And are there any advantages to having autism? I like to share another speaker of ours. This is Lillian. She's a young woman in college, and she has a physical disability. She's a wheelchair user, and she gives advice on how to be inclusive.
Almost out of time. Do you have any final thoughts or advice on how we can all be more inclusive of people with disabilities?
I think just be open to being a friend to somebody who's different than you, and know that it's okay to want to ask questions and to be like, why are you, in a wheelchair, or why are you disabled? As long as you're not going to be rude about it, like if you're not rude, if you're asking nicely, and like you're not like a full-on grown-up who's like trying to be weird, we're gonna be nice to you. And if we're not nice to you, then like that's our problem, and that shouldn't stop you from asking questions, right? So always ask questions. Just be a friend. Notice people that are different. Tell people that, oh, I like your hair, or I like your shirt, if like you think that's cool, or if you find a common difference, chat about that too.
Almost out of
and I don't know if there's any parents who are going to have their kids participating or have participated so far in the classroom presentations, but this is just advice we like to give about, some ways when you're following the UOD presentation. Ask kids to share one thing they learned and one question they wonder about, and then try to investigate that together. Check out the post-unit webpage. Again, those should get shared out with the family message. And there's activities on there, both online and offline, and books and other suggestions. And then we also have an enrichment webpage that has a little bit more to delve into there for the kids that really want to go further. And then I always like to advise that the Schneider Family Book Award, they put out a list of books at different levels. So there's preschool through, high school level, I think is the highest adolescent. And they're great. It's about disability experience. So characters will have a disability, and they may be fiction or nonfiction. And then also, you go looking online, there's authors that read their books during the pandemic, and those videos are still online. So if you're looking for something, sometimes you can actually hear the author themselves reading it, which is great. We also have other programs that we do out in the communities. We've worked with libraries and other community groups and aftercares and things like that. And we love finding ways to customize and fit our program into different ways of raising awareness in communities. And that can be a very nice way to kind of keep the conversation going and also reach other groups. So that I just want, you guys to kind of know about that. We have a web page that talks about our community outreach, but there's even other things that we've done even more recently. And we usually host webinars, educational webinars periodically. If you get your name on our newsletter contact list, you'd hear about those. We do 1 or 2 per year. And library programs, which we have one coming up in Newton. I'm going to show you that in a second. Film screenings, youth organizations, and educator professional development programs too. So March 9th, if you have, someone who would be interested, this is directed at families, but we're celebrating 200 years of Braille. We're going to have 6 different tables exploring Braille in different ways, and it's going to be really fun. I think it'll be a good time. So if you're interested, I have the link here, and I can share this slideshow with you all too afterwards. And then finally, just I love this quote from a 5th grade student who shared about his experience learning about autism. I liked learning about what people with autism are going through. The day after the program, I went to the beach with a family member who was autistic, and because of the program, I could understand a little more about how they might have been feeling that day. That is a sort of kind of quote that keeps me going and makes me really understand that we're reaching the kids and the teachers in the classroom too. I have equal number of quotes from teachers and principals too. I think it's incredibly important for kids to have that window into other people's experiences and a mirror if they do have the disability as well. So I'd love to answer your questions. I'm going to stop sharing so you don't have to keep looking at this slideshow.
I wonder, Jenny, do you have any thoughts about how families can continue the conversations at home, maybe after the assemblies that take place in the school or any other time, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, you mean beyond like the web pages we share and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that seeking out, there's actually quite a few things. Massachusetts is a pretty active place for disability representation, and I think there are a lot of activities and opportunities when you go out and about into the greater world. I think that there's also a lot of ways to find resources online and through the libraries. I think that's also a really good connection. And I think that books, especially, there's so many good books that have come out recently that really have a lot of great representation. And we have those book lists too if you are looking for them, but librarians are also very good at finding these things. March is a big disability awareness month too. And so sometimes libraries will have those sorts of book lists available, and but we're happy to share that as well. And I think that, kids do get curious. Finding ways in through what they're interested in is also another great way to do it. Some of the ways that we set things up for community events would be through going through talking about communication or technology or things like that. So if you have a kid who's interested in technology, for instance, there are so many great things that are happening out there with technology, and short, quick, kid-friendly videos on YouTube, but also there's people who are 3D printing arms and prosthetics, other prosthetics for kids. Those are organizations that you can get involved with like that. There's just a lot of ways to sort of keep that conversation going based on your kids' interests, I think. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah, Sherry?
A question, yes.
Sure.
What if your child is not going to have one of these special programs? How would a parent begin a conversation? And is there a particular sort of baseline to start?
Okay, great. So do you, can you tell me a little bit more about the age group that you're talking about,
I don't have any children, but I'm talking about elementary school children. If you have young children and they're just starting to have the experience of being around other children who might be very different, how do you start the conversation to help them understand? Especially, and somebody brought this up in our Human Rights Commission, what about invisible disabilities?
Right. And that is always trickier, invisible disabilities. And we tend to have a pattern of introducing, sort of more tangible disabilities and going towards the more invisible disabilities. But that said, I think that kids are best prepared when you've had a conversation. And I think the best way to do that with young kids who haven't had much experience yet would be through books. And also there are, I tend to kind of love the PBS variety of shows. They've done a pretty good job with representing disabilities to get the conversation going, I think, because that's at an age appropriate level. People have done the work for you already. And so I think that that's really a good way to kind of approach it. There's some great books that have like sort of a general approach to disability. Sonia Sotomayor actually wrote a book. And there's also one called We Roll Together, which is pretty great about showing all kinds of people together, but that's noticeable that there's people with disabilities. And in the back of the book, it talks about sort of advocates who helped with disability rights, which I think is that really does reach kids. They want fairness. They tend to want fairness. And then the last thing I would say is another great way to do sort of an introduction to disability is talking about accessibility. Just a few weeks ago, in fact, I worked with an aftercare organization, and it was they're K through 4, so they're young, and they had Lillian, that guest speaker you saw at the end. She came and talked to them, and then we went on a walk just a short walk across the street from where they were, and pointed out a lot of places where things were not accessible or they needed fixing. So that sort of taps into that justice that kids kind of innately have when they see things that they want their friends to play with them, or they want somebody who uses a wheelchair to be able to use that crosswalk, for instance. And if it doesn't have the curb cut, they can't cross. They understand that. So we walked around this whole tour and wound up on this playground that is not accessible, and it's a school playground. And then their following week, they wrote to their city councilor. They're the city councilor that manages that, area. So I think that that's another good thing. That something's tangible that is talking about barriers like that is a very good entry point for kids who have no real experience with other people. The invisible disabilities would be captured in that. You can talk about the ways that people might feel, overwhelmed in certain spaces if they have sensory sensitivities, or, other ways that they might not feel included in a sort of accessibility space too. Everybody's had that experience. It's just that people with, if they have a sensory challenge, feel it more intensely. So I think it's something that you can describe to kids. Physical disabilities that you can't see, you can talk about that. I think that kids can relate to that as well. So it's just a matter of getting that conversation at the right level. And again, I think books are a really great way to get that conversation started.
Last year for our Lad Day at Dull Bear, we had parent volunteers read that book by Sonia Sotomayor. And it was really great. And it just creates so many openings to talk about. There's so many things that this book talks about: allergies, autism, dyslexia, so many different things. And so folks can, kids can really say like, oh, my aunt has blah, 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 or my brother has blah, blah, blah. So it's just a really nice opportunity to talk about just kind of like bird's eye view of a lot of different challenges and things that folks have to celebrate. And so that was really great.
Yeah, I love that book. And again, the one that I recently found is We Roll Together. I think or We Move Together, sorry. That's another one. It's a picture book, but it's kind of geared towards a pretty big range of ages because of the extra information in the back that's really compelling, I think. And it's I found it interesting. I learned about some people I didn't know about in the back, about people who, got together as a community and built ramps so people could get up to the next level in a stores. So they did like a community project, and it was kind of an artist or something. I should remember better, but and then there's one more that's actually really good about sort of disability rights history, called All the Way to the Top, which is about a young activist back in the day. She's older now, but she climbed the Capitol steps. She got out of her wheelchair and she crawled up the steps. It's very dramatic to kids, so it gets their attention. But it also covers other disabilities in that one too. So there's definitely some really great. I would start with picture books because I just think they're accessible even for older kids, because it's not so overwhelming. The chapter books can be more involved, and sometimes they don't cover what you want them to necessarily. But there are some really great ones out there now too. It's been kind of impressive in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of different ones come out. So.
Any other questions? Lorna?
You want to mute?
Muted. There you go.
Trying to find the right button to hit. I know that because I saw in the paper the other night that I believe the gentleman who is deaf or hard of hearing that did the Walton School, I think it was. So I was wondering, did he also have an interpreter with him?
So Gary actually, though he speaks sign language, his hearing aids are enough for him to be able to hear, and he can speak. So he doesn't need an interpreter in that context. He just needs people to repeat the questions the kids have for him. We do have other speakers who do bring an interpreter with them. We actually haven't had anybody recently. We used to have kids from the program here in Newton who come from kind of all over Massachusetts.
Newton
but-
North High School.
Yeah. It used to be called
The Ed
Ed,
Pro-
but now it's CAP or CAPS. I can never remember if it's plural or not, because there was another program called that same thing. But so yeah, they would come with interpreters if the kids needed them, and sometimes they do. So, but Gary
It's just-
doesn't in that context. Yeah.
It's just kind of an opportunity to also be able to introduce children to what sign language is and you know, even let them try it out a little bit.
And that's part of the activities that we have the instructions for the teachers to use. And also on the post unit webpage, we have how to learn finger spelling so that they can learn that. And that, you know, there's a couple little videos to help them along with that. And so definitely that is something that we like the kids to try out and learn about, and know that, you know, it's a form of communication they can learn. And you study in college, for instance. And Gary does talk about it because he did learn sign language. And he had interpreters in college, for instance. That's part of his talk to the kids. So he's great. He's been doing it since he was, you know, in 4th grade. So a long time ago. I'd say he's in his late 40s now. So he's been every role of UOD that you can imagine. So he's very, and you know, he's very appealing to the kids. I think they really get a lot out of talking to him.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
Sounds like nice programs that you have.
Yeah. It's really great to see the kids. If you guys, you know, have a chance to, you know, to see it, it's I would recommend. I mean, I think it's really great. And the other thing that happens is, you know, teachers in the room, they're engaged as well. Not every teacher is comfortable with disabilities. Not all, and you know, I think a lot of us did not have programs like this. And I mean, well, you know, Gary did, but and we have been around since 1978, but not, yeah, clearly not everywhere. So I think that it's really helpful for the adults, whether they're teachers, other staff, even principals, parents who, if they're helping out volunteering, you know, there's always a few things you pick up and you kind of learn more about. And it really does sort of broker the conversation about, you know, how do you talk about this? How do you make it okay to talk about? A lot of people are nervous about it. They want to be polite. They don't want to offend people, and that's fine. But then the discussion doesn't happen, you know. So this is our goal, is to make it possible and to you know, lower that barrier to talking about differences. I mean, and there's strengths and challenges that we all have. So we point that out too. And just ways to be helpful as well.
I have another question. Is the UOD substituting now or with the LAD program, or are they working in conjunction?
I can answer that. So I've been organizing Lad Day for Dolbear for the past couple of years. This is probably the 3rd year that I've been involved with it, and this is the 3rd different program that we have used. So I think there is potential to kind of stick with understanding our differences for different content and that sort of thing. But Lad Day itself, this year is unique in the fact that we've brought on understanding our differences.
And what about the Woodville? You didn't mention that as an elementary school that
Woodville,
participated.
yeah, so I started talking with Jenny in October, and Woodville was ahead of the game there. They had already scheduled something else. And so I think, you know, they had another, sounded like an amazing program. I don't recall the details of the program, but they already had something in place, which is why they did not jump on board with us this year.
but at least
Yes.
they're doing something, so.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they've got a great program in place. I'm sorry, I don't have the details of it, but it looked
Nope, that's
exciting.
okay.
But what about the Greenwood School?
So we're working on a plan. We've had some momentum, and then we just need to, complete the plan, I think. So we'll get there.
So I'm gonna just comment that, so I have had two children go through the school system. My oldest is 30, my youngest is 27. My younger son, Dan, was born with Down syndrome. So I would say that Wakefield has done a really good job about educating their elementary students about disabilities. Dan went to the Dole Bear, and at the time, that was where the integrated preschool was, and he stayed there through 4th grade, and then went up through the system, pretty much fully included. That was my request. And I will tell you that I just told you he's 27 years old, and he still has Wakefield friends that have gone to school with him that participate. He's been on a unified basketball team through Special Olympics since he was at the Dole Bear School. My husband coaches that team, and those kids are still coming back to play as unified partners. So yeah, it absolutely does work, what they've learned. And being in class, being in a regular education classroom with people with different abilities. Yep.
I love that story. That's great. So that's good to know that you guys have the unified sports, because that is something I like to recommend kids go to a game if they can,
Well, Wakefield High School has now, wasn't the case when Dan was there. Dan was on the freshman JV and varsity basketball team. Obviously didn't get a lot of playing time, but he wore a uniform and he got out there when he could. But Wakefield has since added a unified, I know they have basketball. I don't know what other unified teams they have. And I think that's awesome. I just think that that's an awesome opportunity. But Special Olympics has unified teams too, in just about every sport. So that's something to be, I think you have to be maybe 8 or 10 to compete. So that would probably be what, like 4th grade ish. But that might be something to mention to them, because you know what? There are typical developing students that don't have the skills, especially at the high school level, to play a high school sport, but they like the sport. They want to play basketball, soccer, or whatever. What an awesome opportunity that is. And they don't know what they don't know. So if no one's brought it to their attention, they don't know it even exists.
I'd love to echo too, Marie, what you just said. I also am a proud Dole Bear mom and a proud mom of little Mia, who's 10 with Down syndrome. And Marie's been someone who's definitely made a path for all of us here in this community. So hopefully one day Mia will be a Dan. But I just want to say thank you to Jill and Jenny for putting on something like this, because I feel like it's so important for the community just to continue to have this ongoing awareness. I think it's really special. You were mentioning about the Lad Day coming up at the end of the month. Dole Bear's also been awesome about kind of encouraging every year for World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, which is 3/21. Any of the teachers that either of my daughters have had at Dole Bear have asked us to come in and we present to the class on Down syndrome, with Mia now being at an age where she can actually be a part of the presentation and can explain things to kids in her own way, which is like, I think, even more powerful than any, presentation I could ever do. So it's a super, super cool thing that I think, my kids look forward to every year. And I think her classmates look forward to, and it's just a really special thing. So Wakefield's definitely been a community I feel like that has been worth the effort to move to in all the ways so far. So super grateful for all you guys are doing to continue to promote inclusion in this really meaningful way.
That's wonderful to hear.
It is. I'm so glad to hear that. It has been my feeling that, bringing in a group like Understanding Our Differences is tremendously valuable and will add to the conversations that we're having, because I know that they're happening in the elementary school. I can hear my kids coming home talking about them. I broach them sometimes. You know, the folks from Dolbear that I've talked to are all really willing and open to having those conversations that I have found so far. I'm really glad to hear from all of you about that too.
I wonder if there's any follow-up programs as the children get older, junior and senior high. I was a junior high school teacher years ago and a high school teacher, and junior high school kids can be greatly lacking in understanding and empathy. And as peer pressure becomes stronger and stronger, especially with social media, I just feel like they almost need lots of refresher courses to remind them. And does anything exist?
We call them sort of booster shots. That's how we think of it. Even before the pandemic, we called it that, by the way. So some of what we've done, and actually Gary was doing this with middle schoolers, is the sort of disability representation in the media discussions with them, with students, and it varied, if it was, an entire grade or more of a smaller group. In the middle school level. And then in high school, we've had success with is having students help organize panel discussions where we call them Beyond Kindness. And the kind of goal is to get kids thinking about the experiences that kids with disabilities have. Sometimes there's a theme. It could be, sort of the brain-based disabilities, or it might just be kids with disabilities in the high school level who share their experience. Actually, we had teachers too before too, as part of the panel, and just share their challenges that they've experienced at the school, but also, some of their joys that they've had at the school, and then open up for questions and sort of connect with the audience that way. It's usually a moderated panel discussion, so there's questions they know about ahead of time, so any kid that would feel nervous about it, obviously they still have to opt into it. They're not pressured into do it. It's a volunteer situation, but they also have sort of the access to the questions ahead of time and can come up with their answers, so they're not really put on the spot. But that has been very successful for the it's usually not the entire school that would be attending the panel discussion. It's usually like a smaller, teachers sign up kind of situation, but that I think it's really worked well. And to have some of the kids planning it has been good because they have that sort of agency, and it actually helps with sustainability a little bit too. So
this is Judy Tanner. I'm joining by phone. I really liked what you said about the little field trip for the class where they would even just go across the street. I think that could be something that the older students could participate in, and just notice how difficult it would be to do that if somebody had a wheelchair. And noticing the roots of the trees that go across the sidewalk, or somebody's trash barrel that's on the sidewalk so you can't get by it, or like you mentioned, the curb cuts. That could be something that the older grades, I think, could participate in.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, and we've done that with all ages, including city councilors in here in Newton and Newton Center, and city planners. So that one definitely, that spans the age range, I would say. It needs to be at the right level for the audience. But I definitely agree with you that middle school and high school would adapt to that very well. And, for the younger kids, we have a very strong play theme, inclusive play. We call the activity that we call it is where's the barrier. So the presentation is talking about where's the barrier in terms of not just the physical structures, but also attitudes. So, and also, not just thinking about specifically physical disabilities, because there's also issues if you can't see, or you need help with wayfinding, language-based disabilities. So we try to cover the spectrum of what you might see have barriers. But yeah, I think it's really a great way to engage that level as well. I agree with you. And it's not too difficult. You don't have to go too far usually. So, I mean, that's not a great message, but I mean, it's usually find challenges, you know, within a pretty close range, unless everything's brand new. That's just the reality, you know, of, especially since we have the freeze and thaw situation. So things do break down and it's hard to keep things maintained. So I'm sure that there would be a route that you could find, or we could find. Yeah. It's definitely, and I've learned a lot through that, honestly. Like, and I think one thing that was really great about this tour we did with the city councilors and city planners, it was led by a man that I know who uses a wheelchair. So he was leading it. It was very easy to see where the challenges were. And then we had the opportunity for the city councilors and city planners to be in a wheelchair being pushed by us. They weren't propelling themselves. It wasn't a simulation. It was more about noticing things. Because there's a lot of redesigning happening here. There's because we're in the MBTA communities, you know, so we want them to know what's problematic. You know, stamped concrete is not a great thing to put anywhere. So, for instance, nobody realizes that until they kind of feel it. So, or see it, you know, cracks like concrete, settles like brick. It's kind of the worst. So anyways, these things, you know, a lot of us don't get it because we're not experiencing it, things like that. So I think it's really great for all ages to kind of encounter that. It'd be a great family event too, I think, actually. There's a lot of discussions that happen with that, and kids adapt to it, and I think adults adapt to it in a different way. So like I think it's really good. It's a very engaging activity, and you can do it on your own too. It's not something that has to be an official program. It's definitely something that with just a little awareness, you can lead yourself. You can find yourself. You'll see it everywhere once you start looking. So I don't know how your playgrounds are. Those are definitely compelling to certain age groups, like because
Well-
ADA compliance not inclusive. So even if there's, you know, if you're meeting the official law, it's not necessarily an inclusive playground. So
Well, full disclosure, Lorna, Judy, and I are on Wakefield's Commission on Disabilities. So our
Oh.
playgrounds are looking really good
Oh,
because
great.
we're really strong advocates. Yeah, so
That's
Wakefield, yeah, Wakefield has done a really good job. I think in all areas. Still work to be done, but we're getting there. And I definitely agree with you about the booster shots at middle school. I think that's the perfect age as a reminder, probably fifth and sixth grade. I don't know. And then the high school has a youth council, and I'm thinking that might be, we have a representative on the youth council on the Commission for Disabilities, and that might be something to mention to her that they think about doing something like that. So Jenny, I'm assuming that you charge a fee to provide your service, and I guess Jill, that probably the PTOs are helping to pay for that. I think that obviously the Galvin, they had a PTO back in the day. I'm assuming they still do, as does the high school. So that might be something to mention to them, to think of, to maybe help fund. Also, the Boys and Girls Club. So many of the students from Galvin go there, like hundreds of them every day. It's very, very popular. And the director, Evan, I'm sure would be really open to programming like this for his participants.
Yeah, and I was just going to say I work at another local high school, and one of the fellow teachers had come up with the idea probably 6 or 7 years back now to incorporate into her. She's a health teacher, but then she also does like a specialized intro to med course for the high school students. And she had, just kind of set off the cuff one day, like, why don't you come in when we're talking about the unit on intellectual disability and how that kind of connects with like medical treatment and first responding and things of that nature. And I was like, I just am a mom, I don't have any expertise other than being a mom. And she's like, trust me, coming in and talking to high school kids, you're going to get the hardest, most authentic questions. And it'll really like resonate with them because it'll be off the cuff and it'll be raw and your answers won't be scripted. And I was kind of like, all right, so I went into it and I've been doing it now for 7 years. Every semester I go in during that unit and kind of just talk off the cuff and answer questions and have pictures of like, my girls like kind of scrolling in the background. But it's been a really awesome experience in the essence of like the booster shot, because some of the questions kids ask, I'm shocked at, in the sense of just like, oh wow, they don't know this yet, and would they have asked this question? And I don't know how much it travels beyond there, but they walk out of that door, they grab a Down syndrome awareness bracelet, and I see a lot of them wearing them years later. So it's just unique how at different moments, like even within the health curriculum or an intro to med curriculum, like any opportunity for us to kind of just put in these refreshers, I just think are hopefully impactful, even if it's just for a handful of kids. Like anybody having that moment, I just feel like makes a difference. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And that's much needed too. I mean, I think that, it's definitely an area, as you know, the medical field can be lagging in some of these things as well. So, or inconsistent. So, yeah. I know there's a lot of work to be done. So
It will
Well-
never end, but
it
And we
changes too.
appreciate-
It changes too.
And we appreciate that you're coming in to help us do the work, Jenny.
Absolutely. I love it. I love being with the kids, and I think it's great. And the people. I'd say that I'm really lucky. I meet really great people in my job. So
Any other?
Give Wakefield credit for being kind of like the forerunner in a lot of this. Back when, I'm not even going to mention the years when I was in elementary school, but there used to be 2 special ed classes held at the Franklin School, which is now condominiums. One was of elementary age, and the other was more of high school age of young boys that had, I think they were doing like woodworking stuff in the basement. Anyhow, they were always included in whatever we did as a class. I would go down and work in their classroom with them, and we would have gym with them, and so Wakefield has always been kind of supportive, and it gave me a great opportunity, because years later I didn't know I was going to have a child with a disability, and so it gave me kind of like hands-on when I didn't realize I was going to need it later on. But Wakefield really has been pretty progressive compared to other places as far as trying to introduce programs, even though sometimes it's a battle for parents to do that. But eventually the town hears it and tries to accommodate as best they can. So I do have to give Wakefield kudos for being kind of like front runners and special ed and inclusion way back when.
I agree. And they've been good listeners over the years. They were a good partner to me when my son was in the system. Yep, I really do have no complaints. So Jenny, if we wanted to get the Boys and Girls Club or the high school or middle school PTO in touch with you, can you provide contact information and how they could reach out?
Sure. So many things down here. Where's the chat?
I know. I don't think we have a chat because
Oh,
of
we
the
don't
way
have a
that.
chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the town doesn't allow a chat. this is a town zone.
Well, I can send, I was gonna send the slides in case you wanted them, and I can also send my information and Jill can share that out. Does that
Yep,
work?
that's great.
That's interesting. I'm like, am I just not seeing it?
Yeah, just in case.
Hmm.
Yep, I'm taking down your name so I can send it to you. Well, any other questions or thoughts or discussion topics for tonight?
Very good presentation. I wish you had had a lot more people on here to hear this, but they'll get it through their kids when
Yeah.
they go through the
Yeah.
program. So
Yeah.
Kids tend to share.
Yes.
It's good, and the teachers will too. There is the message that they will send out, so it's that helps a little too. Hopefully, I know they get a lot, but
Teach the kids and they will teach their friends.
I have to tell you that since this is a town-run Zoom, this is recorded. Do we have
Right.
your permission to share this conversation? I'm the
absolutely.
chair of the Human Rights Commission, and I would like to be able to share it with the community because, not for lack of trying, do we not have 90
I-
people here
I
instead of
know.
10. But I would, after the fact, it's just the same thing with Martin Luther King. A lot of people watched afterwards. So, because I heard from them.
Wonderful.
So
That's
if we
absolutely
have your
fine.
permission to share that, that would be, okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I get it. People are busy, and also there's a snowstorm. You got to get the bread and the milk, right?
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for engaging in the discussion and sparking some new and good discussion. And thank you so much, Jenny, for coming to our schools and coming to talk with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, and I'm so excited. You guys have talked up Wakefield. I'm so excited to be there. It's wonderful to encounter such positivity about it. So I'm looking forward to it even more now. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Yes, thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Thank